All right, let's just jump right in. Imagine for a second you're the manager of this huge, incredible estate. Your one job is to make sure it thrives and to share its amazing bounty with everyone. But what happens if you start thinking, you know what? This estate is actually mine. Today, we're going to unpack one of the most dramatic transfers of power you'll find in the New Testament. It's a story of eviction, a new inheritance, and a mission that was always meant for the entire world.
And it all really centers on this absolutely stunning verdict from Jesus, delivered right to the faces of the religious leaders of his day. I mean, this is basically a termination notice. And it forces us to ask some really big questions, which is what this whole explainer is about. Who exactly is getting fired here? Why were they failing so badly? And who are these new people being hired to take over?
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we've got to look at the original job description. Then we'll dig into how and why the managers failed so spectacularly. After that, we'll examine the eviction notice itself, see how ancient prophecies actually predicted these new hires, and finally, we'll figure out their new role as ambassadors for the kingdom.
To really get why the leadership was fired, we have to rewind and understand what they were hired to do in the first place. You see, this wasn't some new gig. It was a sacred trust, a ministry of reconciliation that had been going on for centuries, starting way back with the very first Hebrew.
It all starts right here, with the foundational promise to Abraham. And the key thing to notice is that this was never about exclusive privilege. It was about a universal purpose. The whole idea was for Israel to be the channel, the pipeline, through which God's blessing and reconciliation would flow out to every single family on earth. It was an outward-facing mission from day one.
And then it gets even clearer. A priest, right, is someone who stands between God and the people. So if God tells Israel they're going to be a kingdom of priests, a whole nation of them, well, who are they serving? It has to be the rest of the world. Their job was to introduce God to all the other nations, making the entire planet their parish, so to speak.
The prophets really just sealed the deal on this vision. Israel was meant to be a beacon, a light shining for the Gentiles. That's all the non-Jewish nations. The plan was for them to live in such a way that their justice, their mercy, their wisdom would be irresistible to the surrounding world. They weren't supposed to build a fortress to keep people out. They were supposed to build a lighthouse to draw people in. That was the job.
So, if the mission was so clear, where did it all go so wrong? Well, the problem wasn't just some small mistake. It was a complete, fundamental misunderstanding of their role. They completely forgot they were just managers, and they started acting like owners.
And this is the absolute core of the failure. Stewardship is all about managing something for someone else's benefit. But in Jesus' parable about the tenants in the vineyard, the managers get greedy. They look at the vineyard, they see the owner's son coming, and they literally say, let's kill him and take his inheritance. They tried to seize ownership of a kingdom that was never, ever theirs to begin with.
And Jesus wasn't just speaking in parables. He got incredibly specific. His indictment against them reads like a laundry list of failures. He called them out on their hypocrisy, being obsessed with rituals but ignoring justice. He condemned them for exploiting the most vulnerable people, like devouring widows' houses. And then, maybe worst of all, he said they were actively blocking others from even entering the kingdom. Instead of being that welcoming lighthouse, they'd become gatekeepers, turning the temple from a house of prayer for all nations into a den of robbers. They did the exact opposite of their job.
Now, when Jesus delivered his final verdict, he didn't just pull it out of thin air. This was a masterclass in communication. He strategically used imagery and stories that his audience knew by heart, and he turned their own sacred texts into a powerful eviction notice. To see how brilliantly this works, you have to remember the prophet Isaiah. He told a famous story about a vineyard representing Israel that produced bad fruit, and so it was completely destroyed. Now, centuries later, Jesus picks up that same story but gives it this massive twist. In his version, the vineyard itself is fine, it's saved. God's kingdom program is not being canceled, but the wicked tenants, they're out. They're being evicted and replaced. It's a change in management, not a liquidation of the whole company. And what was the reason for the eviction? Jesus gives the precise legal grounds by quoting this psalm. The builders, that's the religious leaders, were supposed to be constructing God's house in the world. But when God sent them the single most important piece, the cornerstone for the entire project, the Messiah, Jesus himself, they rejected it. They threw it away. And by rejecting the Son, they disqualified themselves from the job, period. So this naturally leads to the next big question. If the old managers are out on the street, who gets the keys to the kingdom now? Jesus says it will be given to a people or a nation that actually produces the fruit. And what's so wild is that the Hebrew scriptures had been hinting at this very transfer for centuries.
Seriously, this wasn't some surprise plan B. God knew this would happen. If you look back, Moses predicted in Deuteronomy that God would use a non-people to make the established nation jealous. Later, the prophet Hosea talks about a time when those who were called not my people would be embraced and called my people. And Isaiah saw God being found by a nation that wasn't even looking for him. The first apostles read these prophecies and saw the clear blueprint for the church, a brand new, multi-ethnic people, defined not by their bloodline, but by their faithfulness and their fruit.
So what does this new stewardship actually look like on the ground? Well, the identity of these new managers is totally different. They aren't landlords, they aren't gatekeepers, their new job title is ambassador.
Just think about what an ambassador is. They don't represent their own agenda, they don't speak their own words, they are official representatives of a sovereign, of a king, sent to live in a foreign land. This is the new identity. They get that the kingdom of God they represent is, just as Jesus said, not of this world.
This slide really just lays out the massive shift. The old way of doing things was national and land-based, centered on the temple in Jerusalem. You got in through your family line and by keeping the law. The new stewardship is transnational. It's not centered in a place, but in a person, the risen Jesus, and you get access through faith in him. The identity is no longer tied to a piece of real estate, but to a global community of believers. And that is how the kingdom of God is now effectively among us. It's present in its people.
And this brings us right to the heart of the matter. The mission is no longer about guarding a holy building, it's about delivering a holy message. You see, the old tenants killed the messengers that were sent to them. The new tenants are the messengers. They're tasked with what the Apostle Paul would later call the ministry of reconciliation, basically pleading with the entire world on behalf of the King to be reconciled to God.
So we end up with this final thought. The stewardship of the kingdom was taken from local landlords who tried to own the property and was given to global ambassadors who know they own nothing here. They're just tasked with inviting everyone from everywhere to be reconciled to the one true king. And that leaves us with a really powerful question to chew on today. What does it actually mean to be an ambassador, to represent a heavenly kingdom while living here on foreign soil?